I don't want to.
That's really small.
Exactly. Can't get anything done around here.
Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Commission Chairman Mose presiding. Also present are Commissioners Grant Simmons, Scott Torpy, Reed Weber, Wayne Benner, and Ivan Remar. Will Mitchell is absent. Do any commission one more thing before that. If everyone will please stand, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do commission members have any announcements or reports?
Not at this time.
Hearing none, I would proceed with the consent calendar. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Consent calendar is approved. Next, we will proceed with matters from the public. If you would like to speak on a topic included on the agenda, included on the agenda that is not a public hearing or another topic pertinent to city business, now is your opportunity to do so. If you wish to speak and haven't yet completed a sign-up form, please do so and hand it to staff. Do either one of you want to speak on anything that is not on the agenda?
We're doing an update on, so the agenda is just an update on our lot coverage standards, Title IX amendments that are coming to a public hearing in 2 weeks. So you want them to speak now if they want to comment on that item, or wait until after our staff presentation?
This is just general comments.
Okay.
So if you have a general comment that is unique, then now would be your time. If you have signed up
I think Mr. Chambers' comment is about the presentation I'm about to give you. So you might wait till after the presentation, because
all right.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Okay.
Chair.
We could do both.
There's a lot to read if we have a general comment, so I'll just, if we have more people, I would go through it. Okay, move on. Is there anybody on Zoom that is asking to speak? Okay. Okay, we'll conclude the general comment period of the meeting. There is no public hearing. We do have old business. We have lot coverage and lot side code amendment in RM and RS update. Now I'll yield the floor to Jason Welker, Community Planning and Development Director.
Thank you, Chair. Bill Dean is with me, City Planner and Deputy CPD Director, Bill Dean. He's going to jump in here in a moment as well. We've come to you 3 times now, I think, over these amendments that we've been working on since September. Some excellent conversations have been had in this chamber with you all, and we've taken all your feedback, and I think we're getting close to the finish line here. We do have a public hearing scheduled for December 16th, 2 weeks from tonight. And we do hope at that time the commission will feel comfortable making a recommendation to City Council for a quite wide-ranging set of amendments to our Title IX, and those really fall into 3 areas. So I'm going to share my screen here and just give a kind of a summary overview of where we are. And I've only got 4 slides for you, I think, tonight. We're going to focus on the impervious surface building footprint max, which has kind of been the main focus of discussion over the last meetings. But I'll start with just reminding you of what the amendments include that will come to the public hearing later this month. So, one moment. moment, it should be coming up. Mandy, is there a reason my screen's not showing up on the big screen there? I am sharing it.
Let me see.
I'll unshare and try again. Let's try that again. I hope I'm in the right meeting and not tomorrow's city council meeting. There we go. Okay, it's possible I joined the wrong meeting. Okay, so present this, so we'll box out of the way. Okay, so this is not my now 44 slide PowerPoint that we've brought to many meetings. So we're only going to go through the last few slides here with an update for you. So the three amendments that are coming to the public hearing on December 16th can be summarized in these three categories. There's lot coverage, which includes the bullet points you see there. The proposal to adopt a single 70% impervious surface standard, which is what we already have. We have a 70% max impervious surface in the RM zone. But that would just involve eliminating the building footprint maximum of 40% in the RM zone. So we'd be simplifying the measure, the regulation around building footprint and impervious surfaces to adopt that single standard in the RM zone. The sticking point for the commission over the last few meetings has been the impact that a single impervious surface standard in the RS zone could have on neighborhood character. So where we've kind of landed, last meeting, we recommended that we kind of keep things simple and just go back to the original proposal to have a single 70% max impervious surface standard, basically the same standard that we've proposed for RM in the RS zone. But we do take your concerns very seriously about the potential impact that might have on the bulk and scale of very large structures that could theoretically be built all the way up to that 70% maximum. So I think a very elegant and simple solution that we believe would potentially address your concerns and also be very easy to administer is what you see here. And I'll go into some more details of how that would look in a moment. The proposal is basically to keep the max building footprint that we have in code at present in place of 35%, but apply it to two-story structures. Allow single-story structures to exceed the 35% building footprint up to the max impervious surface of 70%. And just to remind you that the idea that a single structure could consume 70% of a lot is fairly unrealistic because that would allow for zero off-street parking, zero patio space, zero covered carports, anything else. So that 70% has to include all impervious surfaces as well. Realistically, you're going to have 500 square feet for a driveway. You're going to have possibly a patio in the rear, maybe a covered carport or something, a gazebo or something. So realistically, that 70% is unlikely to be consumed entirely by any building. But in response to the concerns shared by this commission around bulk and size and scale, McMansions, windows looming over neighbors' yards, we said, well, let's just keep the standard in place, limiting building footprint for any structure 2 stories tall and allow the expansion of single-story footprint to the max impervious surface. We'll go into some more details behind the rationale behind that in a moment. The second area of amendments coming to you in 2 weeks are around lot size in the residential multifamily zone. We currently have a standard minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet in both RM and RS. That's just citywide. 5,000 square feet is the minimum lot size. As we've presented at recent meetings, historically, the hundreds and hundreds of lots in Sandpoint were platted last century at 3,500 square feet. We've basically created a situation where the majority of lots in central Sandpoint are non-conforming with our own code. And we've done all sorts of gymnastics to come up with alternative ways to apply code to those historic non-conforming lots of record, as we call them. The proposal is just to make those lots legal again and allow new development to reflect the development pattern of 100 years ago. This city was platted with workers in mind. Allowing small lot development is one way to promote affordability. I'm not going to say affordable housing, but to promote affordability in Sandpoint, knowing that there's a simple relationship between the available supply of housing and the price of housing. We do have a stipulation in code that already allows for the creation of 3,500 square foot lots, but only in the case of common wall townhouses. So our current code already allows common wall townhouse lots as small as 3,500 square feet. The proposal is to scale that down proportionally proportionally with the decrease in the minimum lot size as well, to allow common wall townhouse lots to be developed down to 2,500 square feet. And then finally, a very simple amendment to our RM density standards that would increase the allowed density by 1 unit at each lot size range in the residential multifamily zone. I'm not going to go into a ton of details on that tonight. We're going to save those details for the next meeting when this comes to public hearing, where we will have one final update to this PowerPoint for the public that's there. But we did want to go into the main sticking point over the last couple of meetings, which is this bulk and scale and the lot coverage. So maybe Bill, do you want to address this quickly? Yeah.
I think you did. I think what might be more helpful, Jason, at this point is maybe go on to the images that you have. Because this just basically is the bulleting what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
The idea is just keep the standard we have in the allowance.
Sorry,
just
mine is reading you.
just keep the standard that we have for two-story structures, and then just allow the allowances for single story. Just that's one way to deal with neighborhood compatibility. And keeping in mind, and I had this conversation with another person earlier today, when you're talking about neighborhood compatibility, it's not just one standard we have to keep in mind. We've got a complement of standards. We don't allow ADUs in the front yard, for example. We have standards for garages being setbacks. You don't have snout houses with the garages up in front. We've got fenestration and other patterns that we expect on the fronts of buildings. We have setbacks. We've got a whole bunch of standards. So I think we need to be careful not to just associate compatibility with any one. So I think it's important for us to look at the whole of it. We're not proposing to amend any of those things I just mentioned. We're proposing to amend just the lot size, or the lot impervious surface to be one characteristic. So I think the images that Jason's going to show, I think, help us arrive at what I think might be the sweet spot now. But we'll hear from you to see if that's indeed the case.
All right, so it's always good to get kind of visuals behind these concepts that we're exploring. So these are two houses that are actually right across the street from each other in South Sandpoint. They both, and I measured this on our GIS, they both consume exactly 35% of the lot size. They're built right up to the maximum building footprint allowed in the RS zone. They're quite different. They have quite different impressions from the public realm, though, from the street. One, of course, is built all the way up to the 35-foot maximum allowed in the RS zone. The entire building footprint goes up to that 35-foot max. There's no single-story part of that house. The other one, there's only a very small two-story section of the house, and something like 70 or 80% of the house is a single-story structure. So it's a large structure. They're equally large in terms of building footprint, but one has, in my opinion, more of a dominant presence on the street. So that's kind of a concept I want you to consider: is what variable contributes more to the bulk and scale, the building footprint or the building height? Are we really regulating bulk and scale when we limit building footprint to 35% of a lot? And we think we can do better by applying that to not just to the building footprint, but to the building height. So I thought a little bit more about this. So how could both these property owners benefit from the proposed amendment? And in fact, right now, neither of these property owners, despite there being thousands of square feet of undeveloped property on their lots, neither has the option of building an ADU in their backyard. Okay, because they're both at the 35% building footprint max right now. Under the proposed amendment, both of these could theoretically build an ADU in the backyard. What's the difference, though? One of them would be limited to a single-story ADU because 35% of the lot is already consumed by a two-story structure. They can't build any more two-story structure in the rear of the house. So they'd be limited to a single-story ADU, which presumably would prevent this sort of looming structure peering into the neighbors' yards that we hear complaints about in Sandpoint with ADUs right now. The house on top, though, because they're not consuming 35% of their lot with a two-story structure now, could perhaps do, a two-story ADU with a shop or an alley accessed, carport in the back. So they both benefit. So we're not really discriminating against these two property owners. Both could do an ADU after the proposed amendment if they desired. but one would be limited to the height of that ADU and the other could go up to a taller height. So just a kind of an application there of how a proposed amendment would impact two property owners. Okay, and this is so kind of just going back to this question, like what really is determines bulk and scale. I'm gonna let Bill talk about this slide if you want to jump in here, Bill.
Yeah, again, I think it's a great community issue for us to grapple with, and I think we should, take our time with it as we have to make sure we're honing in on what could be the right answer given the objective, which was to try to, again, where did this come from? Our comp plan says we should be looking at a variety of ways to densify and deal with affordability, look at different lot sizes and things like that in the RM zone specifically, which led to this conversation that we've been having about compatibility if we make some tweaks to our zoning ordinance for single family areas. And this idea of bulk and scale, they really work together with building height. I mean, it's you have to look at all of it together. You can't just look at one and say the other doesn't really apply as you're trying to define what makes the imposition of a structure compared to its neighbors. So what we think is we found a way to combine the two ideas, just to continue allowing property owners to enjoy the two-story 35% and this allowance for additional structure for the extra living quarters for the grandma or the grandpa or the ADU in the backyard just to be limited to that single story in height. But make no mistake, when you're adding more allowable development on a lot, you're going to see more structure. The question is what would be a reasonable way to balance the objective of having something that's deemed compatible, and by limiting the height, I think combined with the limitations on what you can do with two stories might just get us there. But we really want to hear from the commission ultimately in the public hearing next time with the public as well. But this is basically a relatively simple tweak as opposed to a complicated formula we were kind of evaluating over the last couple of meetings. We had several different formulas we were looking at to see how you could scale things to deal with the issue of how much structure goes on a lot as the lot size increases. So this was the attempt to try to find the sweet spot. And I think what we did is we also went back to that purpose statement that I think was important, because when inevitably a question will come up down the road about intent of a particular standard, we have a purpose statement that we've been working on with you that we've modified, and we've retained some of the language. I don't believe this shows the strikeout language, but we retained some of the original language that was there that related to limiting the bulk and massing of taller structures. So we've introduced some of that, reintroduced that language, and made some modifications, and we think this is probably moving closer to the direction that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. So I think it would be worth your while to maybe take a minute and read this to see if we're approaching what makes sort of finds the sweet spot, as I'm saying. So.
While everybody's taking the minute, Chairman, can I ask a question?
Mr. Reimar.
The cottage development code or whatever we have, do we have?
We do.
such a- How will the RM and the RS affect the cottage development? My question being is that, if you have a lot that has a home on it already and you want to go cottage, are the cottages ADUs or are they underneath it entirely?
Cottage is a separate thing. Cottage has its own code, its own regulations, as it relates to the number of individual cottage units. I think it's 5 minimum on a project. There's a lot size required that goes with that. The short answer is that the cottages have their own. There's a separate cottage ordinance. In fact, we can pull it up here. There's a separate cottage ordinance entirely that.
So it's kind of like a PUD so that they can.
A little bit like that.
Are they set to any setbacks or anything?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. We'll pull it up really quickly so you can see the actual cottage code. It's got its own distinct set of standards
Under
under residential. Just give us a second here while we pull it up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the one up on Division Street, where I don't know how deep the lot is. Maybe there's some empty lot behind it, but I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 plus the house. And it's jammed in there.
Yeah. So the cottage housing ordinance is resides within the residential portion of the code. And it provides for the standards of how to do a cottage development. It's a pretty difficult set of standards to comply with. I mean, it's fairly prescriptive in terms of what's, how you can do one.
Okay, so will these, so if we accept, or this, people talk next week and then it goes to city council and they take your suggestions for what we're doing, will any of those affect the cottage code? No, they won't. The cottage code will remain the same.
The cottage code, there's a statement early on in the cottage code that says if there's any conflicting codes, this cottage code prevails. So this was intended, the way it was drafted, I think it's right up there in the purpose statement right after that, conflicting standards. The standards within this particular code shall prevail. I think that's a pretty strong statement that this was intended to be a separate and unique piece of the residential complement of our ordinance for how we deal with housing.
And
But I think I'm glad you're asking the question. I think what we'll do between now and the hearing in a couple of weeks is I'll give it another once over to make sure that there's no obvious conflicts. I don't believe there are.
Yeah.
But I'll take a closer look. Is there anything in particular that's jumping out at you that you're?
Well, I'm just thinking, somebody's coming to town and
Right.
land's expensive and you're sitting there saying, boy, I can buy a house on thing and I can throw 4 more cottage units on this thing and,
Right.
I'll get 5-foot setbacks on my edges and I'll have 2 foot between the existing buildings on the property, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can
Well,
create
here,
ghetto.
yeah, here at 9476 density standards, 9476A on the screen, cottages may be built up to 2 units per single family home allowed in the underlying zone. So if you have if we're going to be rejiggering, say for example, in the RM zone, if we're going to allow an increase of 1 unit per any given acreage, if we adjust that table that's in the RM zone to allow 1 more unit like we've been talking about, that would have an effect here. Because I don't think that's a conflicting code, because this is pointing to that underlying zone saying what the allowance could be. That's a great question. I think that may be the only one I can think of.
One other consideration though is that by allowing more units on per lot size range in the RM zone doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see cottage developments at twice that density pop up, because there are other performance standards in the cottage development ordinance that prevents high levels of density. For example, the example you just gave is not possible. 5-foot setbacks with 2 feet between structures. There's 400 square feet per unit required of open space,
Right.
not shared open space, unique open space for that cottage. So on you could say, well, the code says I can build 8 units on this, 8,000 square foot lot or whatever, but good luck achieving 400 square feet per unit of open space on that size
My
lot.
gut reaction is you might get 1 more, but it's going to be tough because there's a lot of standards here for open space and dispersion and how they orient to a common area and how parking's handled. It's very prescriptive.
There's also minimum building footprint
Yeah.
sizes for cottages. You can't build 400 square foot cottages and squeeze 12 of them into, a really small lot.
Good question.
I'm not saying you guys don't know what you're doing. I'm just looking for leaks.
No, sure.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, you should be asking that.
That's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Torpy?
Yeah, just on a basic level, how is, right now, how do we determine the height of a building? Is it if it's on a slope, is it the average across some slope thing? Is it,
Finished grade at the front of the building.
Right.
it's grade at the front of the building? Okay, so if you have a slope lot, then the back of the building might be
Yeah,
quite
you're
a
not,
bit.
if you have, let's say,
Let's just pull it up on the screen and show
Commissioner
them.
Mitchell, for example, lives on a sloped lot. He's not here tonight, but he's got, I don't know if he does, but some of his neighbors have like daylight basements you can like walk out.
Yeah,
The building height is not measured from the bottom of the backyard or where you'd walk out of a daylight basement. It's from the front street profile.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so when we talk about a single story structure, I can imagine some single story or single level homes, because of the architecture might be greater than 18 feet, doesn't matter. I mean, if it's
18
greater than
feet.
18 feet, that's what matters.
Right.
It's not a
Single story, 18
quote, single story that matters. It's the 18 feet, right?
Just to follow up on that question, kind of nitty gritty code stuff here, but with like with a single story building that's 18 feet tall, would you allow for, I can see people asking this question about having like a bonus room in that attic space if you have a 9-foot ceiling? You got 11 more, you have like 7 or 8 more feet to play with in a vaulted space. Does that, so would the code be specific to just the building height alone or actually the number of levels within this space?
We have a lot of structures that aren't limited by number of stories in town, but by the height. So you can walk a couple blocks north of here and there's 3-story houses that fall underneath the max building height.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that's,
Right now,
if you want to get creative and live in a hobbit house, that's up to you.
Right, it's 18 feet.
Yeah.
That's it. It's left at that. If there's a concern there, let us know and let's dialogue through it.
Just wanted to verify. I think it's
Yep.
fine, just the height alone, but
Yeah, so is it just the height alone? So
It is.
would we strike the 1 story without,
two-story
avoid confusion? You know, if it's more than 18 feet, then that portion of the structure goes toward the 35%. Anything less than 18 feet, it's like a patio. It's equivalent of a patio, right?
For in the abundance of clarity, so we don't have this problem, we can easily make it just say no taller than 18 feet. That's just so much easier than not saying that and trying to explain it later.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great.
Actually, that-
Well, when we wrote it as 1 story.
No, actually, in the draft amendment we're bringing, it's very clear. It's a table that says.
Yeah, that's right. We reduced it to a table. That's
I
right.
can show you what we're actually bringing to you in 2 weeks.
We thought through this. I just can't remember we had that. We had thought through that.
So it's just a very simple table.
Yeah.
Some, obviously, less is
Yeah.
more in a lot of cases. So this is all we have. No structure on a lot shall exceed the following height limits as measured from the finished grade.
Yes, that's.
So it says nothing about the stories.
We were dealing with this very same issue, and I forgot right before Thanksgiving we redrafted it to say that. Yeah.
And then there's existing exemptions to the max building height, such as flagpoles, satellite dishes, things like that we're not changing.
Yeah.
So this is a preview of what we're bringing to you in 2 weeks as of right now. It could change, but this is,
Are there any other slides? I don't think that's.
that was it. That was all my slides.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, we'd love to hear from the commission, and are we on the right track? I mean, look, the last thing we want to do is rush this. So if you're not comfortable, we need to continue talking about it. I mean that seriously. I mean, if we have to spend another several meetings on this, it's okay.
So I got another one. Yeah. Okay. So if someone, like in the examples you showed us, the pictures, has sort of maxed out their 35% allowance because they have a 2-story structure that consumes that much, they would be relegated to a single option of a 17.99-foot ADU. ADUs require, I think, off-street parking, right?
One per unit.
One per
One
unit.
per
One per ADU.
unit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, just to point out though, if you have let's say you have a 2-car garage and a driveway that can fit 2 cars, you can apply one of those spaces because you don't need 4 parking spaces for any house in Sandpoint. So you could just use your driveway as your ADU parking space.
But not everybody has that. So we have the requirement.
My point is you don't always have to build an additional parking space when you build an ADU.
Just keep in mind, it's not the requirement that it be in an enclosed space. It's just a space.
Right.
You could put a pervious gravel pad next to your ADU and call that your off-street parking and not diminish.
Not
your
even
impervious.
counted against impervious. Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Do geo stones or pavers of some sort that are pervious.
Right. Okay.
As long as you have off-street parking, you can park in the grass. Just call it a parking space. Actually, I don't think we allow that. I take that back.
It's got to be a hard
You
surface.
have to have some
Got to be a hard surface. right.
designated parking space. Yeah.
AstroTurf.
AstroTurf is not pervious.
Yeah.
I did ask that question actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we, thanks for this, like, good work. I mean,
we had a bunch of kind of interesting objections. I think it's sort of an elegant way to handle it. I'm very curious on what the public
Yeah.
says about it, right? I mean, that's sort of my big, I'm very curious because this is a significant change in terms of what will be afforded for the community. Curious as to what they have to say, but I'd say kudos. Yeah. It's a good way to handle it.
We're hopeful that people realize that we're dramatically extending their property rights through this. This is a deregulation that stands to benefit hundreds of Sandpoint households and, you know, fulfills several important objectives from our comprehensive plan around thoughtful infill development, housing affordability, increasing the housing stock where we can do it through simple zoning updates.
Well, not only that, but I think it also, we were very mindful of the original plating design for the community. And this is going back to exactly that, saying let's allow what we once allowed. And then as it relates to the building heights, again, and as we all experience these neighborhoods, whether we live there or we walk down the sidewalks or drive through them like we all do, these wonderful neighborhoods, we're not changing the rules as it relates to what happens in that sort of quasi-public realm. We're not saying you build things up to the property line in front or allow, you know, changes to what can happen in that space that we all experience as we walk through and enjoy these neighborhoods. But again, yes, there will be structures in backyards where there are none today. And some of those will be two-story and some of those will be single-story, depending on your situation with what's there currently. So to say this has no effect is not true. It will have an effect. It's very purposeful that it will have an effect. It's just whether or not the effect is acceptable. And that's, I think, what this body's job is to do, is to help us all arrive at what's acceptable. Knowing, of course, if this thing completely belly flops, so we can always go back and revisit it and change it. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But we're putting a lot of effort in this. And that's why I want to be very clear. We have no intention of rushing anything. We want to think through it like we've been doing.
One comment that I've heard is that wastewater or stormwater was the concern or was the rationale for the previous or for the current standard.
70%, still 70%. So the amount of what you can, you know, in terms of perviousness, that's not changing at all. And I think an engineer would tell you there's a lot of safety factors built into the how they plan for storm drainage, which is typically done on a, you know, watershed level and this, you know, a regional level, and then eventually at the site level. So we're not changing the amount of perviousness. It's just what you're allowed to do with it.
Any other comments, questions? Can we hear from the public now?
Yeah. Your meeting, sure, absolutely.
Chris?
Chair, commissioners, staff.
Okay, who are you and where are you from? Where do you live?
Chris Chambers, I live in Sandpoint, I'm city resident of Sandpoint. And what I wanted to show tonight, or at least talk about, was just the street facing view of some of these properties. I'm in support of the upzoning. I think it's a good idea. I think it can have some unintended consequences. Some of these larger lots could potentially be bought by speculators and thinking that I might be able to subdivide and carve out more lots and get more density. Not necessarily going to create more affordable housing, but they might just sit there. You see a lot of that speculation in downtown Sandpoint with a lot of vacant lots that people have bought waiting. It's kind of like somebody's waiting for the first person to build something. But anyhow, I have the luxury. May I hand these out?
Please.
I've got one. There's one for Bill. Thank you.
It's the one that lives in Spokane up in a little bungalow on South Hill. And on
Thanks, Joyce.
Manitoba Boulevard. So on Manitou Boulevard, the city of Spokane, just as background, in case you don't know, kind of upzoned the entire city. And there weren't a whole lot of controls, and at least from what I see, based on this handout. And so some developers in particular, hooked up with a real estate agent and said, it's the Wild West. We can do whatever we want in Spokane. You can build anything on any lot. I'm not saying that's what we're trying to do here. And so the first page shows that there's a lot of sales activity in this neighborhood. So it's not like this neighborhood is stagnant. And so somebody comes in and buys an old house, tears it down, and creates two lots side by side. And they build it in such a manner that it dwarfs the two houses next door. And it has a street presence. The architecture is completely different from the neighborhood. And so these houses sit there for 3.5 years, finally went into foreclosure in October, and now the bank owns them, and they still haven't sold. But the premise of this whole thing was, hey, this is a big gold rush. We can make a lot of money and we can stuff everything in. So you get further back in that little packet there, and it'll show, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a vacant lot. That was a single family lot that has been cut up into 5 different lots. And they're 17 feet wide, but they meet the standard because they're deep enough. And they're available now for the low price of $450,000 if you wanted to buy 2.5 and 2.5. So the affordability doesn't necessarily go down on some of this. And I think that you all are, after just sitting here for 15 minutes listening to you, you guys are all aware of that, and pretty much what you're doing. But I think it would be nice that if somebody's going to build a fourplex on Euclid Street or Huron or 3rd Street or anywhere 6th Street, that they go in front of perhaps the historical commission and say, at least take a look 2 blocks to the left, 2 blocks to the right, and across the street, and try and fit in. I know there was a lot of thought and effort that went into the planning of 6th Street and how that lays out. And so people like some of these neighborhoods. We have a lot of little pocket neighborhoods that have a lot of charm based on what the staff was saying, that people like to drive down the neighborhoods and see the quaint houses and the comfortable feel. So you start crowding in closer to the street, maybe because the whole neighborhood was built back and they have the right to build closer to the street. I think that we should, I don't know if you can add that in or if that's a consideration, but preserving that historical nature, because you take the Airbnb thing, you remove that, you don't really know. So I appreciate staff's comment of maybe slow it down a little bit. If that Airbnb thing, all of a sudden we have hundreds of licenses that come up in the first quarter of the year, then who knows, right? Then those are not permanent residents that are going to go buy donuts downtown. Those are vacant holes in town that are going to see a lot of turnover. And so then you do that and you bring in an upzoning like this, and you could end up with even more kind of dead holes in town, especially where there are larger lots. So, and I don't think I'd like to see that. I don't think you guys would either. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm clear that we're not anywhere close to this.
Chair, do you mind if we just
Yeah, go
share a
ahead.
couple thoughts on this?
Yeah.
First of all, thanks, Chris, South Sandpoint, former neighbor of mine. I totally appreciate it. I lived on Huron. Our code doesn't allow for the development of multifamily attached housing in the RS neighborhoods, period. So the whole white part of the map, which is about half of our residential zones citywide, attached housing is not an option. Out beyond duplexes, is that correct? Do we allow
No,
duplexes?
there are some limitations. It is allowed. It is allowed.
In what form? Okay,
The-
sorry.
the way our ordinance
Bill
is
loves
worded-
questions on the fly like this.
Yeah, well, it's, okay. I cannot wait till we rewrite some of this stuff.
Working on it.
Just in terms of clarity, not talking about changing standards, just in terms of what the actual ordinance says. Right here in the residential RS zone, there's some limitations. Attached housing is permitted with some limitations. Multifamily dwellings are not allowed, yet that's caveated. So we have seemingly two provisions of the code that says it's allowed, and another provision says it's maybe not allowed, but there's some footnotes to that non-allowance, that prohibition. And the footnote says development of attached housing units or cottage housing in the RS zone should not be restricted by this provision. So it says it's not allowed, but then it says it's not restricted. So we have to read all this stuff together, and that's what makes it so difficult for anybody to understand what it says. So I think that the answer is yes, there are scenarios where multifamily can occur in an RS zone, but there are some restrictions. Okay.
Another observation from the example of the attached townhouses on Manitou on the South Hill. Just a couple ways our code might make that, our proposed amendments might make this specific example, unlikely to occur in Sandpoint. Those appear to be taller than 30 feet. We have a proposed addition to our code. I'm going to share my screen again. Now this actually applies in the RM zone. In the RS zone, I assume these would exceed the 35%, two-story maximum. Not sure how deep those lots are, but just looking at them, they seem to have no setbacks on the interior lot line, obviously, and very minimal setbacks on the outside lot line. So chances are that two-story structure consumes more than 35% of the lot. But we also are proposing an addition. This is just not one of the details I went into tonight, but it will be in your packet for the next meeting. In multifamily, in RM, we're conscious of the fact that smaller lots, we're allowing the creation of lots down to 3,500 square feet. You could end up with a situation where with that 3-foot setback that we allow in smaller lots already in code, very tall structures, like you see in this picture, could loom over the neighboring structure. So in the RM zone, the max building height is 40 feet. But if you want to build on a lot smaller than 5,000 square feet, your max building height gets dropped down to 30 feet, which is 5 feet less than what's allowed in an RS zone. So pretty dramatic decrease in the max building height on small lots in the RM zone. And keep in mind, we're not proposing small lots in the RS zone. We're keeping the minimum where it is today is 5,000 square feet. So these are very small lots that you see in this picture. Those are townhouse lots that are probably 2,500 square feet, half the allowable lot size in our RS zone. I'm just guessing based on what I see there. But a couple of protections we have in place here. The 35% max building footprint for two-story structures would make this project impossible, assuming this is in a single-family zone. And the 30-foot building height would make this project likely impossible because that looks to be about 35 feet to me.
That could be the case, or maybe it turns out that it could happen. I don't want to say here that couldn't happen because there's a possibility that, something similar to that could happen. I think we see examples of that today. I think we see examples of some of this juxtaposition today in Sandpoint. I think it was an interesting point that there are some qualities to pockets of these neighborhoods. I think pockets was the term that was used throughout Sandpoint that have, what you string together a grouping of homes. Maybe it's a half a block, maybe it's a block, maybe it's 2 blocks, maybe it's a little bit larger. But certainly there's these groupings where you seem to have some relative consistency in what the houses look like. The Historic Preservation Commission back in 2018 adopted a master plan. And that master plan was a pretty exhaustive effort. It's partially federally funded through some grants administered by the state to help address and deal with historic preservation consideration and issues that have been long talked about in the community. One thing that was interesting in that plan, and I encourage anybody who's interested to take another look at it, is that in addition to identifying contributing structures and identifying what is now an historic district that's on the National Register that includes 10.7 acres and 40-something structures, is that it takes a step into the residential neighborhoods and says, in addition to these efforts at downtown and in some of the commercial areas, there's this effort that's a survey that was done for various neighborhoods, suggesting maybe there's a look into these neighborhoods to try to begin a dialogue around what measures can be taken to preserve some of the character that we see in those pockets. This is, again, a planning document that says, hey, look, we've done the survey. These are some things that maybe could happen in the future. So that, and one of our commissioners very early on in my tenure here came to me, Mr. Benner, and said, hey, have you ever thought about doing overlay zoning districts in our, or having neighborhood plans? I thought, well, let me put a pin in that and let me get my legs about me before we start diving into specific things. But as I've been working on the downtown historic stuff, scouring the state over examples of how this is done in other areas and what might be appropriate for us, I started drafting new rules as it relates to the use of overlays. Right now, we have one overlay district around the airport. We also have a parking overlay area. So, like, in the drafting of the context of working on the commercial districts, I said, you know, this might be applicable someday in other areas. So I've kind of baked into the work I've done the idea that there's this tool that we're putting in the zoning ordinance that says you can have sort of a character overlay that the city has at its disposal to apply where it wants. And we'd have to go through a process at some point to see if that's something we want to do. And what I mean by that is you basically have your base zoning standard, you drape over the top of it, over some particular geography, a set of additional standards that can be examples overlay are, you know, environmental protection issues, airport issues, safety issues, parking issues. One that is used is, you know, urban design, character issues. So taken kind of a step in that direction. And when we get into the historic preservation stuff, which you'll see in the beginning part of next year, you'll see where I've laid some groundwork for that. But right now, our code, I want to be clear, our code does not have historic preservation or character considerations. And somebody builds a single family home on a lot, there aren't standards and review that would compel us to make it of a similar type, quality, in terms of look and feel as to anything in the neighborhood. It can pretty much build and have the designer's discretion to do what you want to do. We don't have that sort of compatibility provision in the ordinance. Somebody applies for a single family structure, or in addition to it, you know, you meet the basic zoning standards and you get your permit. So I appreciate that, but I just want to give you some context that you might, it's on my mind. I mean, I see this. I mean, maybe this is something that happens in our future with some sort of additional design guidelines in certain areas. So I'm kind of baking into the rewrite of our zoning administration this idea that there's this overlay tool that we could pick up and we could apply if council wanted to do that and those property owners were on board. So anyway, I leave that with you. But right now, we don't have protections against the images that were presented momentarily ago.
Commissioners, any questions?
No, I had an opportunity to talk to staff the other day and went through quite a bit of this here, which I thought they helped me really understand what was going on. And yes, it's our neighborhood that a few years ago kind of got together to really spearhead the neighborhood concept. So.
Yeah, only I've got to say, I'm familiar with the overlays. It goes back to the 90s, Breckenridge. And they did historical overlays. And then over that, they did overlays for height of homes, shadow lines, view lines. But I'll tell you, as a builder, I mean, it made it expensive. I mean, you had to bring in surveyors at foundation excavation, footing, top of footing, location of stem walls, top of stem walls, top of first finished floor, top of second finished floor. So you were bringing a surveyor onto the site like 8 times during construction to maintain the exact heights that you had to have to meet all these other requirements. It was stringent. It made sense. It was it's a valley. You're coming down the mountains. So if somebody builds in front of you, blocks the mountains, you're like, yeah, You know, but I can't, that's the drawback to some of these things is that you can create so many restrictions that you could end up in court real quick or, things get kind of crazy. But at the same time, as Chris shows here, I would hate to see something like that pull off, but without architectural control, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Yeah, we have our ordinance right now. It's section 914 that establishes what the threshold is for triggering what's called a site plan review permit, which is basically a discretionary permit that we issue where, some of these compatibility issues, kind of like farm and flats, that obviously was that the threshold is, more than 4 units. It triggered it because that was obviously 80 something units, but 5-plex, 4-plex, that's going to trigger that. Where you're getting into these compatibility issues. Anything less than that is just, it's a building permit you're getting. And we just don't have the rules in place that would forestall something like this. Yeah, they're just not on the books.
And it's unfortunate, and I know I'm not, architects and designers stay current. And, but, there's a real trend towards monoslope homes, 2-story skinny monoslopes. They're cheaper to build substantially, more profit line for those developing them, but they're really incongruent, short of a garage maybe, they don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could go the route of adopting standards. I mean, that could be, that's something this commission wants to recommend as we get into this dialogue. The city council start looking at, we can add it to the work plan and see how we could fold something like that in. I understand it's a concern, and we should be concerned about that. We should be concerned about, what is the full complement of these rules going to look like? Anytime you have a rule, you got to be really clear as why you put it in place and what the consequences of it are. Right now, there's nothing preventing this from happening. These images that you see, in fact, we see it here now. Going on with, with individual sort of expression on a lot.
Yeah, a few years ago, I think Heather, her last name, was involved with the city. Heather Upton. She did quite a bit of work looking at just ADUs and designing them to be more traditional in style. And that kind of evolved a little bit over a few months, and then it kind of got dropped for whatever reason, just maybe the changing of the guard here. But I think there's been interest in it in the past. It's a big effort to take on to actually apply these design guidelines for housing, but I think it's been looked at fairly recently. So maybe there's a opportunity to pick it up again in the near future.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I know we're talking about this in the context of our work right now in downtown. The residential neighborhoods is a whole nother lift entirely. So, right. We're analysts. We're going to follow orders, and that's what we're going to do. That's, you fold it into the realities of our work plan and see where this goes. If that's something our city council wants us to do, happy to do it.
Yeah, tough one. It's kind of, there's some subjectivity in here where you, as an architect, you want to typically try to fit the context, but there's no requirement, and the client might say, maximize this lot. If we build overhangs, we lose building footprint potentially. So let's cut those off, and then it totally doesn't fit in to the traditional style. So it's a tough situation.
It is a tough situation. So, you try to, I think some of the work that you mentioned Heather that she was doing, I had the opportunity to look at some of the material she had put together. The direction that was sort of heading when my last conversation with her on it was more of an example as opposed to a regulation, as a design sort of example. Here's some designs that have been sort of vetted as compatible. So here they're for your viewing pleasure and use if you like, shy of stamped plans that someone could just pull off the shelf and use. But there was an effort there to get something up on the website that suggests that here's some ideas for compatibility. And just 100 years ago, they're common to use pattern books. which were basically descriptions of the constituent parts of how you situate a building on a lot and the constituent parts of that building, what they might look like. Pattern books were common and used as a tool to make sure that as things were built, they sort of followed some minimum standards. We just don't have the pattern books today here. Other places do, but not here.
Well, I think right now we only have, I mean, just what I am aware of is you've got South Sandpoint. I mean, that could be, I'm not saying do this, but I'm saying if you had an overlay, that would be kind of an historical overlay, not historical, but a character overlay. And then up the old, whatever it was, farming subdivision number 2, I think, where they had the 60-foot right of ways. So Oak and Church, up to, I think, probably 7th, or wouldn't up there, it'd be Ella or something like that, would be one. But as soon as you get to the northern part of town after that, those are all mill shack and mill shack lots. And you're going to be hard pressed to say, okay, you know, there's a theme here.
Yeah, and I encourage, if you have time, and maybe Mandy can help me send out a link tomorrow to this historic preservation document. I think it's a very interesting read. A lot of work was put into this in 2018. It was adopted by city council. It's an adopted plan. It has some great examples of these neighborhoods that were identified, surveyed as potential future. Hey, maybe we should look at these a little more closely in terms of crime protection. So it's in keeping with what I think has been an ongoing dialogue for a while. It's just a matter of if and when, and then ultimately how we would approach that. And one tool I could keep bringing up is his overlay. So
Yeah, could you send that out? That'd be great.
yeah, absolutely. We'll send a link to that tomorrow.
Look on the bright side. Us boomers, baby boomers are keeping the height restrictions down low.
That's right.
Because we don't want to go up steps.
Yeah. I identify as a boomer.
What?
I identify as a boomer.
Yeah.
Steps.
I live in a single story home and I'm happy about that. Well, I think we're good. I like what you're doing.
Yes, good
Yeah,
job.
thanks for the work.
And Chris, thanks for providing that info.
Thank you, Chris. Good job.
You guys doing a great job. Thanks, appreciate all that.
Thank you. Any more matters from staff? Unrelated? Or it's crazy. I've heard twice on the radio, two different cases where I think one was in the state of Idaho where there's this Airbnb short-term rental occupant permit situation going on. And then probably a day or two later, I heard about somewhere, and I didn't catch where it was exactly, but there's a lot of cities that are limiting the numbers of Airbnb or short-term permits, and there's a lot of activity. And I was surprised to hear that there was that cities were doing it, and it was very encouraged.
In other states, I assume you mean.
Yeah, in other states, not in Idaho. So that would be the key bit of information there that other states that were, I believe, far more east than where we are. So
if anybody hears of lobbying efforts by the short-term rental groups in other states, similar to what's going on in Boise, in Idaho, I'd be interested to know. I think we might be sort of the test state for these efforts to completely deregulate short-term rentals.
You might want to look up Santa Fe.
Santa Fe.
Yeah. So
There's
they did it
similar-
at the municipal level and it's been
That
not
was just in the
quite the
news.
same, but it's a bit of a, I mean, it is divisive.
Yeah.
Divisive.
Well, I think regulation of short-term rentals is almost always done at the municipal level. So I think
Yeah,
for
there wasn't
bang
any
for
sort of
buck,
state lobby.
The
thing.
lobbies gonna direct their efforts towards state capitals to try to, handicap cities'
Yeah.
abilities to regulate STRs through state laws. You know,
But Santa Fe sounds like it's an interesting little case study in itself. Yeah.
well, the politics of New Mexico would be somewhat similar to Idaho, but not in Santa Fe.
yeah.
Not even close.
Not in the state.
So Yeah, anybody else? No? All right, because we can move into the commissioner roundtable, which would be your opportunity to speak on whatever. We've hit it all, I think. All right. If there's no further business before the commission, this meeting is now adjourned at 6:30.
Thanks, Mose.
Thank you.